In Montana's Bitterroot Valley, a 600-pound grizzly bear lies dying, its massive body ravaged by an invisible enemy. This isn't about natural predators or hunting accidents. It's about a parasite infestation so severe, it's bringing down nature's most powerful predator. John Miller, a third-generation Montana farmer with 20 years of wildlife rehabilitation experience, stands before the suffering giant, knowing he's about to attempt something unprecedented, saving a fully grown grizzly bear in the field. What he discovers today will uncover a devastating ecological crisis threatening Montana's wildlife. Most people run from a suffering predator. John is about to risk everything to save one, armed with nothing but his expertise, medical supplies, and raw courage. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning sun painted long shadows across Miller's Creek farm as John Miller began his daily routine. At 53, his weathered face and calloused hands told the story of 3 decades working this land, but it was his eyes that revealed his true passion. They constantly scanned the tree line, checking the wildlife trails that crossed his property, monitoring for any signs of distress among the creatures he'd sworn to protect. His grandmother's old farmhouse had become more than just a home. It was a sanctuary. The barn housed makeshift recovery spaces for injured wildlife, while the storage shed had been converted into a small medical station. 20 years of wildlife rehabilitation had taught him to be prepared for anything. "Morning, Doc," he called, out to a rehabilitated great horned owl perched in the barn rafters. The bird had earned its nickname 3 months ago when it arrived with a broken wing. Now it served as a reminder of why he'd chosen this path, combining traditional farming with wildlife protection. The spring air carried worrying signs. Fewer tracks in the mud near the creek, unusual movement patterns among the deer herds. Something was disturbing the natural order of his valley, but he couldn't piece it together yet. Sarah Chen, the local wildlife veterinarian, had been noticing it, too. "The animals are stressed," she'd told him last week during her monthly visit. "We're seeing unusual parasite loads in the smaller mammals, but can't identify the source." John paused at his equipment shed, where shelves of medical supplies and wildlife monitoring gear stood ready. His father had called him crazy for converting half their agricultural storage into a wildlife medical station. "Farmers grow crops," he'd said. "They don't play doctor to wild animals." But John had seen too much suffering in his early farming. Days, animals caught in traps, wounded by careless hunters, or sick from environmental changes. He couldn't stand by and do nothing. His radio crackled, the emergency channel he maintained with local rangers. "Miller, you copy? Got unusual bear activity reported near your South Creek." John grabbed his medical kit and binoculars. The South Creek was where he'd been finding those strange tracks, larger than usual for the local bears. "Copy that. I'm heading out to check. Any signs of aggression or distress?" "Negative, but Thompson said the behavior seemed off. Bears moving slow, staying visible. Not normal." "I'm on it," John replied, already loading supplies into his ATV. Years of experience had taught him to trust his instincts, and everything about this situation felt wrong, like the pieces of a puzzle he didn't want to solve were finally coming together. As he drove toward the South Creek, his mind raced through possibilities. The parasites Sarah had mentioned, the changing wildlife, patterns, and now a bear behaving strangely. His grandmother had taught him that everything in nature was connected. When one part suffered, the whole system showed signs of distress. The morning light filtered through the trees as he approached the creek, unaware that he was about to face a challenge that would test everything he'd learned about wildlife rehabilitation and uncover a threat bigger than anything he'd imagined possible. The signs had been there for weeks, subtle at first, but growing impossible to ignore. John's journal entries tracked a disturbing pattern. March 15th, 3 deer showing unusual lethargy near the North Pond. March 23rd. Fox cubs abandoned. Mother found severely weakened 2 days later. April the 2nd. Unprecedented parasite load in local rabbit population. Now, reviewing his observations in the early morning light, the pieces started fitting together. Sarah Chen's lab results lay spread across his desk. Blood work from various species showing similar anomalies. The parasites they were finding weren't just common wildlife infections. These were aggressive, resistant to standard treatments, and spreading rapidly through different species. "It's like nothing I've seen before," Sarah had said during their last consultation, her usual confidence shaken. "The parasites are adapting faster than we can track them, and they're jumping between species that shouldn't be connected." The ranger reports painted an equally troubling picture. Bear sightings had increased threefold in the past month, but not from normal spring activity. These were distressed animals, breaking their usual patterns, venturing closer to human settlements than ever before. John stood at his observation post near Eagle Ridge, where he'd spent countless dawns monitoring wildlife movements. The breakfast, scraps he regularly left for monitoring purposes, lay untouched. Even the ravens were behaving differently. Through his binoculars, he spotted traces of unusual bear activity. Broken branches too high up, claw marks too erratic, signs of stumbling. That healthy bears never showed. His sat phone buzzed. A text from Mark Thompson, the senior ranger. "2 more bears spotted near River Pass. Same symptoms. Need your eyes on this." The photos Thompson sent chilled John to his core. The bears showed signs of extreme weight loss, despite abundant spring food sources. Their fur was patchy, movements uncoordinated. Most worrying were their eyes, glazed and unfocused, like animals fighting a losing battle against an internal enemy. "Getting reports from other districts now," Sarah added to their group chat. "Whatever this is, it's spreading up the valley. Lab results show parasitic evolution unlike anything in our databases." John's grandmother had kept detailed wildlife records dating back to the 1950s. He'd digitized them all, creating a historical baseline for local wildlife health. Nothing in 70 years of documentation matched what they were seeing now. The morning wind carried the sound of distressed wildlife, calls that were too frequent, too desperate for this time of year. Something was fundamentally wrong in his valley, and it was getting worse. The bears, as apex predators, were showing the most visible symptoms, but John suspected they were just the tip of a terrifying ecological iceberg. He packed his advanced medical kit, the one reserved for the most serious cases. Whatever was affecting, these animals needed more than standard treatments. As he checked his supplies, he couldn't shake the feeling that today would bring something unprecedented. He just didn't know how right he was. Dawn hadn't yet broken when John's instincts jolted him awake. Something was wrong. The morning chorus of birdsong was missing, replaced by an eerie silence that any experienced outdoorsman knew meant trouble. Even his barn owl, Doc, had abandoned its usual perch. The thermometer read 42 degrees, unseasonably warm for early spring in Montana. John pulled on his reinforced field gear, designed for close encounters with large predators. The weight of his tranquilizer rifle felt reassuring against his shoulder. After 20 years of wildlife rehabilitation, he'd learned to trust his gut, and right now every fiber of his being screamed that today would be different. His radio crackled to life. "John, you up?" Sarah's voice carried unusual tension. "Getting multiple calls from the South Valley. Something spooked every animal in the area. They're all moving north fast." Before he could respond, Mark broke in on the emergency channel. "Miller, we've got tracks, big ones. Grizzly, but the pattern's all wrong. It's stumbling, disoriented, heading straight for your creek bend." John was already moving, medical kit secured to his ATV. The morning mist clung to the ground as he navigated the familiar trails, now eerily empty of the usual wildlife. Even the ground told a story, scattered tracks showing animals fleeing in panic, not from a predator, but away from something near the creek. The first rays of sunlight were just breaking through the trees when he heard it, a sound that made his blood run cold. Not the typical growl of a healthy bear, but a deep, agonized moan that spoke of tremendous suffering. 20 years of experience hadn't prepared him for what he was about to find. He dismounted silently, approaching on foot. The creek bend lay ahead, shrouded in morning mist. Through his binoculars, he caught glimpses of movement, massive but uncoordinated. The bear was there, but something was terribly wrong with how it was moving. Sarah's voice whispered through his radio. "John, I'm 10 minutes out with the emergency kit. Whatever you do, don't approach alone. The blood work from yesterday's samples. It's worse than we thought. These parasites, they're affecting neural function, making the hosts aggressive, unpredictable." But John knew waiting wasn't an option. The sounds of distress grew worse, and beneath them he could hear something else, the labored breathing of an animal in critical condition. Every second could mean the difference between life and death. As he crept forward, the mist began to clear. First he saw the massive paw prints, deeper on one side showing severe limping, then broken branches that told of a desperate struggle to stay upright. Finally, in a small clearing by the creek bend, he saw it, and the sight would haunt him for years to come. The grizzly, nearly 600 pounds of what should have been pure power, lay partially collapsed against a fallen log. Its fur, which should have been thick and healthy in spring, hung in patchy clumps. But it was the bear's eyes that stopped John cold, clouded with pain, yet holding an intelligence and desperation that called out for help. In that moment, John Miller, with all his experience and training, faced a decision that would change everything. The radio at his belt squawked warnings. His logical mind screamed about the dangers, but 20 years of working with injured wildlife had taught him something else. Sometimes, the biggest risks came with the most important rewards. The bear's eyes met his, and in that moment, John knew that everything he'd learned, everything he'd prepared for, had led to this moment. What he did next would either be his greatest achievement or his last mistake. Time seemed to freeze as John assessed the situation with practiced precision. The grizzly's chest heaved with labored breaths, each exhale carrying a whimper that no healthy bear would make. At this distance, he could see the signs more clearly. The bear's mucous membranes were pale, indicating severe anemia. Its pupils, though responsive, showed the telltale cloudiness of a massive parasitic infection. "John, do not approach." Sarah's voice crackled through his radio with commanding urgency. "I'm 5 minutes out. This could be rabies, brain parasites, anything. One swipe from those claws." He switched off the radio. Sarah was right about the danger, but wrong about the time. This bear had minutes, not hours. Already, he could see the tremors running through its massive frame, signs of organ systems beginning to fail. "Hey there, big guy," John spoke softly, using the calm voice that had soothed countless injured animals. The bear's eyes tracked him, good sign, still alert despite the infection. He took a careful step forward, then another. 2 decades of experience screamed warnings about approaching a wounded predator, but something else, something deeper, told him this was different. The bear made no aggressive move. Instead, it let out another moan, its head dropping slightly. Permission or exhaustion? John had seconds to decide. In one fluid motion, he unslung his medical kit and pulled out the tranquilizer gun. Standard protocols required a full team for bearing darting, but standards hadn't accounted for this scenario. He loaded a precisely calculated dose, enough to sedate, but not enough to further stress the failing organs. "I know you're hurting," he continued speaking, voice steady despite his racing heart. "I'm going to help, but you need to trust me." The bear's eyes never left him, showing an intelligence that reinforced his decision. The dart found its mark. With practiced accuracy, John started his mental countdown, 3 minutes until sedation. He used the time to set up his mobile treatment station, laying out medications and diagnostic tools with mechanical efficiency. Each passing second revealed more symptoms. Ticks and other external parasites swarming visibly across the bear's skin, evidence of severe diarrhea, patches of fur falling out in clumps. Sarah's ATV roared into the clearing just as the bear's eyes began to droop. "Have you lost your mind?" she shouted, already pulling equipment from her vehicle. But her actions betrayed her words. She was setting up a field IV line before finishing her sentence. "Look at this." John pointed to the bear's exposed skin, now visible as they worked. "The parasitic load is unprecedented. Multiple species, all feeding aggressively. But why here? Why now?" The bear's blood pressure was dangerously low. They started emergency fluids while taking samples for analysis. Each new discovery painted a grimmer picture. This wasn't just a random case of parasitic infection. This was something systematic, something that had fundamentally altered the valley's ecological balance. "We need more supplies," Sarah announced, already calling for backup. "And John, if this doesn't work, if we lose him..." She didn't need to finish. They both knew that treating a wild grizzly in the field broke every protocol in the book. If things went wrong, his career, possibly his life, would be forfeit. But as the morning sun finally broke through the trees, illuminating their desperate work, John knew he'd made the only choice possible. Sometimes, the biggest risks came with the most important obligations. He'd sworn to protect the valley's wildlife, and today that oath would be tested like never before. The next 30 minutes became a blur of urgent medical intervention. John's hands moved with practiced efficiency as he and Sarah worked to stabilize their massive patient. The bear's vital signs told a frightening story. Temperature 3 degrees below normal, heart rate erratic, blood pressure dropping despite the emergency fluids. "This isn't just normal parasitic infection," Sarah muttered, drawing blood samples while monitoring the IV line. "Look at these tissue reactions. It's like the parasites are working together, targeting multiple systems simultaneously." John was already administering broad-spectrum antiparasitic medications, but his experienced eye caught troubling signs. The bear's blood wasn't clotting normally. Patches of skin showed signs of secondary infection. Most worrying were the neurological symptoms, subtle tremors that suggested the parasites had invaded the central nervous system. Rangers Mark and Pete arrived with additional supplies, their initial shock at the situation quickly giving way to professional focus. "Never seen anything like this," Pete said, helping set up a protective canopy over their impromptu field hospital. "Got reports of 3 more bears showing similar symptoms near Crystal Lake." The blood analysis unit Sarah had brought beeped with preliminary results. Her sharp intake of breath made everyone pause. "This is impossible. I'm counting at least 6 different parasite species, all hyper-aggressive, all showing signs of rapid mutation. The load levels are off the charts." John's hands never stopped moving as he processed this information. 20 years of wildlife medicine had taught him to work and think simultaneously. The mutations explain why our normal treatments aren't working. These parasites have evolved beyond standard protocols. The bear's breathing suddenly became more labored. Alarms beeped on their portable monitors as its oxygen levels dropped. "We're losing him," Sarah warned, already preparing emergency medications. "Not today," John replied firmly. He quickly intubated the bear, a procedure he'd never attempted on a grizzly before, but necessity drove innovation. The tube barely fit, but it worked. Oxygen levels stabilized. Mark's radio crackled with updates from other rangers. Similar cases were being reported across 3 counties. Whatever this was, it was spreading fast and targeting apex predators first. The ecological implications were staggering. "Look at this," Sarah called, examining tissue samples under their field microscope. "The parasites are showing signs of organized behavior. They're not just feeding randomly, they're systematically attacking specific organ systems." John's mind raced through treatment options while continuing supportive care. Standard protocols weren't working because this wasn't a standard situation. They needed something new, something that could match the parasite's aggressive adaptation. "We need to try the experimental treatment," he decided, reaching for his satellite phone. "The one they're developing at Montana State's Wildlife Lab." Sarah's eyes widened. "That's still in trials. We don't know the side effects on bears." "We don't have a choice," John replied, already dialing. "If these parasites are truly evolving and organizing as you suspect, this bear isn't just a patient, it's our chance to understand what we're really facing." As if understanding the gravity of the moment, the sedated bear's massive paw twitched, brushing against John's boot. In that touch, he felt the weight of responsibility, not just for this one life, but for all the wildlife threatened by this emerging crisis. Time was running out, and they were about to attempt something unprecedented. In wildlife medicine, the sound of helicopter rotors cut through the morning air as Montana State's Wildlife Emergency Team arrived. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, the state's leading parasitologist, jumped out before the blade stopped spinning, her team of specialists close behind. One look at their expressions told John they'd never seen anything like this either. "Tell me everything," Elena demanded, already donning protective gear. Her eyes widened as she took in the bear's condition and the array of emergency interventions already in place. "You intubated a grizzly in the field? That's either insanely brave or necessary," Sarah cut in, showing her the blood analysis. "Look at these parasite levels. We're dealing with something completely new." Elena's face grew grave as she studied the results. Her team spread out, setting up advanced diagnostic equipment around the sedated bear. "These parasites are showing coordinated behavior patterns. The DNA sequencing is unlike anything in our database." The experimental treatment arrived with them, a new broad-spectrum antiparasitic drug developed for resistant cases. But it had never been tested on bears, let alone one in such critical condition. "His organs are starting to fail," John reported, monitoring the vitals. "If we don't act now, we'll lose him." He locked eyes with Elena. "What are the risks?" "Best case, the treatment kills the parasites before they can adapt. Worst case, the drug accelerates the organ failure." She paused, studying the bear's tremors. "But you're right. Without intervention, this bear has hours at most." The team worked with practiced efficiency, setting up additional IV lines and monitoring equipment. The forest clearing had transformed into a sophisticated field hospital. Other wildlife experts arrived by ground, each bringing new pieces to the puzzle. "We're seeing similar cases in Idaho and Wyoming," reported Dr. Marcus Chen, regional wildlife disease specialist. "Always apex predators first: bears, wolves, mountain lions. It's like something systematically attacking the top of the food chain." Elena's analysis revealed more disturbing details. These parasites aren't just coordinated, they're showing signs of engineered behavior. The way they're targeting specific systems, adapting to treatment, this isn't natural evolution. "You're saying someone created this?" Sarah asked, her voice sharp with disbelief. "I'm saying we need to consider all possibilities," Elena replied carefully, "because if this spreads through the ecosystem the way I think it might, what we're seeing here is just the beginning." John made the call. "Start the experimental treatment." "Full dose," His hands remained steady as he administered the drug, but his mind raced with implications. If these parasites were indeed engineered, someone had just weaponized ecology itself. The bear's massive body shuddered as the treatment entered its system. All they could do now was wait and hope they hadn't just made a terrible mistake. The first hour after administering the experimental treatment was the longest of John's life. Every beep of the monitoring equipment, every twitch of the bear's massive frame could signal either recovery or catastrophic failure. Elena's team worked frantically, analyzing samples under portable microscopes while running advanced genetic tests on their field equipment. "This is impossible," Elena muttered, staring at her tablet's display. "The parasites aren't just cooperating. They're actually communicating between species. Look at these chemical markers." She turned the screen to show complex molecular patterns. "They're using the host's nervous system to coordinate their attacks." Dr. Chen pointed to another anomaly in the data. The genetic structure shows signs of CRISPR modification. These aren't natural mutations. Someone deliberately engineered these parasites to work together. "But why target apex predators?" Sarah asked, adjusting the bear's oxygen flow. "If you wanted to damage an ecosystem, wouldn't you start with easier prey?" John's years of wildlife experience supplied a chilling answer. Because apex predators control population balance, remove them, and entire ecosystems collapse. He checked the bear's vitals, still critical, but stable. This isn't just an attack on individual animals, it's biological warfare against the entire food chain. Elena's equipment beeped with new results. The parasites are showing resistance patterns similar to classified military research. Whoever engineered these had access to advanced bioweapon data. The implications hit hard. Their bear wasn't just a sick animal, it was patient zero in what could become an ecological catastrophe. The tremors running through its massive frame weren't just symptoms, they were warnings of a threat that could reshape entire ecosystems. "Look at this," Dr. Chen called out, examining tissue samples. "The parasites are actually modifying the host's DNA, creating permanent changes that could be passed to offspring. They're not just killing these animals, they're trying to alter the entire species." The bear's vitals suddenly spiked. The experimental treatment was taking effect, but whether it was helping or hurting remained unclear. John watched the readings with growing concern. They weren't just fighting to save one animal anymore, they were racing to understand a threat that could destroy the natural balance of the entire American wilderness. "We need to contact federal authorities," Elena decided, reaching for her satellite phone. "This is beyond local wildlife management. We're looking at a potential bioterror event." But as she dialed, the bear's monitors erupted in urgent alarms. The battle for survival was entering a new phase, and the next few minutes would determine not just this animal's fate, but possibly the future of wildlife across the entire continent. The experimental treatment's effect was immediate and violent. The bear's massive body convulsed as the drug coursed through its system, setting off every alarm on their monitoring equipment. John and his team fought to stabilize their patient, while Elena's instruments recorded the battle happening at a microscopic level. "The parasites are fighting back," Elena announced, eyes fixed on her microscope. "They're actually changing their molecular structure to resist the treatment. I've never seen adaptation this rapid." John's hands remained steady as he administered counter-seizure medication. "Blood pressure dropping," he reported, "core temperature rising." Years of experience told him they were walking a razor's edge. Too much intervention would kill the bear, too little would let the parasites win. "Look at this," Dr. Chen called out, pointing to his tablet's display. "The parasites are releasing some kind of chemical defense. They're using the bear's own immune system as a weapon against our treatment." Sarah worked quickly to draw blood samples, her movements precise despite the chaos. "Oxygen levels critical. We need to make a decision, push forward with the treatment or back off." The bear's heart rate suddenly spiked dangerously high. They were losing ground. John made the call that would either save their patient or doom it. Double the treatment dose. If these parasites can adapt, we hit them harder than they can handle. Eleanor's eyes widened. That could kill him. They're killing him anyway, John replied, already pushing the medication. Sometimes you have to trust your instincts. The next few minutes were pure intensity. The bear's vital signs went haywire as the increased dose took effect. But through the portable microscopes, they could see something extraordinary happening. The parasites were dying, unable to adapt fast enough to the massive treatment surge. It's working, Eleanor breathed, watching through her scope. But look at how they're dying. They're releasing some kind of signal chemical. They're warning each other. Can they communicate with parasites in other hosts? Sarah asked, the implications hitting her. If they can, every infected animal in the region could start developing resistance, Dr. Chen warned. We need to understand exactly what we're dealing with before this spreads further. The bear's vitals began to stabilize, but John knew this was just the beginning. They'd won the first battle, but the war for survival was just starting. Whatever these engineered parasites were, whoever had created them, they'd just proven one thing. Nature's deadliest predator could be brought down by an enemy too small to see. And somewhere out there, someone was watching their experiment unfold. Word spread through the Bitterroot Valley like wildfire. By mid-afternoon, John's makeshift field hospital had drawn a crowd of concerned locals, kept at a safe distance by ranger cordons. Local news vans lined the forest access road, their satellite, dishes reaching skyward like mechanical trees. 3 more bears reported down near Thompson Falls, Mark announced, returning from patrol. Local vets are overwhelmed. Everyone's asking how you managed to save this one. The sedated grizzly's vital signs had finally stabilized, but the implications of their discovery were just beginning to ripple outward. Mayor Linda Hayes arrived with the county emergency management team, her usual political polish cracking. Under genuine concern, we're getting calls from ranchers all over the valley, she reported. Sick wildlife everywhere, not just bears, wolves, mountain lions, even eagles. Whatever this is, it's spreading faster than anyone expected. Elena's team had set up a mobile command center, coordinating with wildlife officials across 3 states. The pattern is consistent, she explained to the gathered officials. The parasites target apex predators first, then move down the food chain. We're seeing early signs in coyotes and foxes now. Local veterinarian Tom Blackhawk, who'd treated reservation horses for 30 years, brought disturbing news. Found 2 dead wolves on tribal land. Same symptoms. Our elders say the balance is broken. When the predators suffer, everything suffers. The community's response transformed from curiosity to action. Hunters volunteered as spotters, using their knowledge of wildlife patterns to track the spread. Ranchers offered their barns as emergency treatment centers. Even the local high school opened its labs for basic sample processing. We've got calls from CNN and Fox, Sarah reported, checking her phone. CDC too. They're sending a team. This is now classified as a potential biological hazard. John watched the gathering crowd through the trees. He'd known these people all his life. Tough, independent Montana folk who usually minded their own business. But this crisis was different. When nature itself was under attack, old rivalries and politics fell away. University labs are confirming Elena's findings, Dr. Chen announced. The parasites show clear signs of genetic engineering. Someone created this deliberately. The implications sent a chill through the gathered crowd. This wasn't just a wildlife crisis anymore. It was potentially an act of ecological terrorism. The question wasn't just how to treat it, but who would target nature itself, and why. Mayor Hayes took charge. We need to coordinate our response. Every hunter, rancher, and outdoor guide needs to report unusual wildlife behavior. Every vet clinic needs to be ready for critical cases. And every citizen needs to understand this isn't just about saving a few bears. This is about protecting our entire way of life. As if to emphasize her words, a distant howl echoed through the valley, a wolf's call, but weak and distorted. Another apex predator fighting a battle it couldn't understand, against an enemy it couldn't see. The war for survival was expanding, and their community was now the front line. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows over the emergency command center as new data poured in from across the region. Elena's screens displayed a nightmare spreading in real time, red dots marking infected wildlife appearing across Montana, Idaho, and Wyoming. The infection pattern isn't random, she explained, pointing to the digital map. Look at how it follows watershed systems. These parasites are spreading through the water supply. John studied the distribution while monitoring their recovering grizzly. The timing's too perfect. Every major ecosystem in the northern Rockies hit simultaneously. This was planned. Dr. Chen arrived with results from the university's advanced genetic analysis. The parasites show markers from at least 3 different classified military research programs. Someone combined them, creating a hybrid that can survive in multiple species while maintaining its engineered traits. But why? Sarah asked, helping. Local vets process new tissue samples. Who benefits from destroying apex predators? Tom Blackhawk, who'd stayed to help monitor local wildlife, offered a perspective that chilled the room. Control the predators. Control the ecosystem. Our tribal records show what happened when wolves were eliminated. Entire landscapes changed. Now imagine that happening by design, across the entire region. Elena's computer beeped with new alerts. The parasites are showing signs of horizontal gene transfer. They're sharing resistance abilities between species. Every time we develop a treatment, they adapt and spread the adaptation. The implications were staggering. John watched their sedated grizzly, now a living testament to both the threat and their chance to fight it. They'd saved one bear, but the broader crisis was just beginning to reveal itself. We're getting reports of early symptoms in ungulate populations, Mark announced. Elk, deer, even moose. The parasites are moving faster than predicted, adapting to new hosts. CDC officials arrived, transforming the site into a high-level biological containment zone. Their preliminary assessment confirmed their worst fears. This was no natural outbreak. Every test revealed more evidence of deliberate engineering. Someone created a weapon that doesn't just kill wildlife, Elena concluded grimly. It permanently alters ecosystems. Change the predator-prey balance, and you can reshape entire regions without firing a shot. As if nature itself was confirming. Their fears, unusual bird calls echoed through the valley. Raptors flying erratically, their hunting patterns disrupted by the spreading infection. The entire food web was beginning to unravel. The grizzly stirred slightly under sedation, its massive frame now ground zero for understanding both the threat and their chances of stopping it. They'd won one battle, but the war for ecological survival was revealing itself to be far larger and far more deliberate than anyone had imagined. The crisis took a devastating turn at sunset. Their recovering grizzly's vital signs suddenly crashed, sending alarms screaming through the command center. Elena's team rushed to analyze new blood samples, while John and Sarah fought to stabilize. "They're patient. This is impossible," Elena announced, her voice tight with disbelief. "The parasites we killed, they're not dead, they're transforming." Through the microscopes, they watched in horror as supposedly neutralized parasites underwent a terrifying metamorphosis. Dormant organisms sprang to life, revealing a secondary form they'd never seen before. "It's a fail-safe mechanism," Dr. Chen realized, reviewing genetic markers. The parasites were engineered with a survival protocol. When the first wave dies, it triggers a second phase of infection. The bear's condition deteriorated rapidly. New symptoms appeared, neurological changes they hadn't seen before. The creature's brain activity showed patterns that defied natural explanation. They're not just attacking the body, Sarah observed, studying neural readings. They're altering behavior. Look at these aggression indicators. If this bear wakes up... John understood the implications immediately. An apex predator with artificially enhanced aggression would be devastating to the ecosystem. And if this was happening to every infected animal... We've got reports of bizarre wildlife attacks across 3 states, Mark confirmed through the radio. Predators hunting in unnatural patterns, showing no fear of humans. It's like their survival instincts have been completely rewritten. Elena's analysis revealed something even more disturbing. The secondary parasites are carrying engineered DNA sequences we've never seen before. This isn't just about killing wildlife or disrupting ecosystems. Someone's trying to create a new kind of predator. The CDC officials upgraded the crisis to maximum containment. Their initial treatment protocol wasn't just failing, it was potentially accelerating the parasite's planned evolution. Think about it, Tom Blackhawk said grimly. Create a parasite that makes apex predators more aggressive, remove their natural caution around humans, and release them across the Rocky Mountains. You've just turned every bear, wolf, and mountain lion into a biological weapon. The grizzly's monitors showed increasing neural activity. Their window of opportunity was closing. Soon, they'd have to decide, maintain sedation indefinitely, or risk waking a creature that might no longer be the same species they'd tried to save. There's more, Elena added, her face pale as she studied new genetic data. These parasites, they're showing signs of human compatibility. Whatever someone engineered them to do to wildlife, they could potentially do to us. The revelation hit like a physical blow. They weren't just fighting to save wildlife anymore, they were racing to prevent what could become the most devastating biological weapon ever created, one that could turn nature itself against humanity. Darkness fell over the command center as military helicopters thundered overhead, bringing specialized containment equipment. The grizzly's vital signs had stabilized, but brain activity continued to spike in alarming patterns. Every expert on site knew they were watching a time bomb tick down. Neural transformation is accelerating, Elena reported, studying real-time brain scans. The parasites are restructuring entire sections of the brain, particularly areas controlling aggression and fear response. John hadn't left the bear's side for hours, monitoring every subtle change. 20 years of wildlife medicine had taught him to read the smallest signs. Something was different about their patient's breathing pattern, its muscle tension. The creature under sedation was changing in fundamental ways. Incoming data from Wyoming, Dr. Chen announced. They lost containment on 2 infected wolves. The animals showed unprecedented pack coordination, attacking ranch buildings directly. No fear of humans, no natural caution. Both had to be eliminated. Sarah's satellite phone buzzed with updates from other sites. Similar reports from Idaho. Infected mountain lions hunting in groups. Something that should be impossible. They're demonstrating completely new social behaviors. The implications chilled everyone present. Their sedated grizzly wasn't just fighting an infection, it was potentially becoming a prototype for a new kind of apex predator. Look at these hormone levels. Elena pointed to her screens. The parasites aren't just affecting the brain, they're altering the entire endocrine system, changing how the body processes fear, aggression, even social impulses. They're literally rewriting millions of years of evolution. Military biological weapons experts arrived, their assessment grim. This is beyond anything in our classified records, Colonel Phillips admitted. Someone combined multiple restricted research projects, creating something that doesn't just kill, it transforms. The bear's monitors showed another spike in brain activity. Even under heavy sedation, new neural pathways were forming. They were watching evolution happen in real time, driven by microscopic engineers with an unknown purpose. "We need to make a decision," John announced, checking medication levels. "Our sedation drugs won't last forever. Either we find a way to stop this transformation in the next few hours, or—" He didn't need to finish. Everyone understood. Their patient, the first one they'd tried to save, might need to be sacrificed to prevent something worse from emerging. Tom Blackhawk spoke from where he monitored wildlife reports. "The elders speak of times when nature itself turned against mankind. We thought they were just stories. Maybe they were warnings." Outside, the night woods had fallen unnaturally silent. No owl calls, no coyote songs. As if the wild creatures themselves sensed something wrong in their midst. The darkness felt alive with possibility and threat. Dawn was approaching, and with it would come the moment of decision. They had hours left to either save their patient or prevent it from becoming something that could change the balance of nature forever. The pre-dawn hours brought a surge of activity to the command center. Local ranchers arrived with portable generators and floodlights. High school science teachers came with their lab equipment. Even the reservation's traditional healers joined. The effort, bringing centuries of wildlife knowledge to bear on this modern crisis. "We've got what might be a breakthrough," Elena announced, her voice hoarse from hours of non-stop research. "The parasite's secondary phase requires specific chemical triggers to complete transformation. If we can block those triggers, we might prevent the final neural changes," Dr. Chen finished, already calculating dosages. "But we'd need massive amounts of the blocking agent, more than we have on site." That's when the community's true spirit emerged. Mayor Hayes coordinated with local pharmacies and veterinary clinics. Ranchers offered their livestock medicine supplies. The tribal clinic shared their entire stock of relevant medications. "Every minute counts," John warned, checking the bear's latest readings. "The neural restructuring is approaching critical threshold. Once those changes complete—" "We've got military transport incoming," Colonel Phillips reported. "Bringing specialized containment equipment in case we fail. They're authorized to use lethal force if the subject becomes hostile." Sarah organized local veterinarians into teams, preparing for either outcome. "If this works, we'll need everyone ready to replicate the treatment across the region. If it doesn't—" The gravity of their situation hung heavy in the air. Their success or failure here wouldn't just determine one bear's fate. It would provide either the solution to the crisis or proof that infected predators needed to be eliminated. Latest satellite data shows infected wildlife converging on population centers, Mark announced grimly. "Whatever these parasites are doing to their hosts, they're creating coordinated hunting patterns, like they're building an army." Elena's team worked frantically to synthesize the blocking agent from their gathered supplies. Every minute brought new reports of wildlife attacks, each one showing increasingly unnatural behavior patterns. "There's something else," Tom Blackhawk noted, studying the bear's movements under sedation. "The muscle spasms. They're not random. It's like the parasites are conducting physical trial runs, testing their control over motor functions." The eastern sky began to lighten. They had perhaps an hour before their sedation drugs began to fade. 1 hour to either save their patient or prevent it from becoming the prototype of a new kind of biological weapon. John looked at the gathering of experts, community members, and officials. They represented humanity's best qualities: cooperation, determination, the will to protect nature even at great risk. Whatever happened next, this response had shown the strength of their community. The bear's monitors beeped with another warning. Time was running out, and nature's balance hung in. The balance. First light crept over the mountains as Elena's team finished synthesizing the blocking agent. The bear's vital signs were deteriorating rapidly. Increased heart rate, erratic brain activity, muscle tremors that suggested final transformation was imminent. Neural restructuring at 80%, Sarah reported, monitoring multiple screens. Once it hits 90, the changes become permanent. We've got maybe 15 minutes. John prepared the injection, his hands steady despite exhaustion. The formula represented their entire community's combined resources and knowledge. Modern medicine, traditional herbs, and cutting-edge science merged into one last hope. Latest satellite data is concerning, Colonel Phillips warned. Infected predators are showing coordinated movement patterns across 3 states. Whatever these parasites are planning, it's starting. Elena's analysis painted a grim picture. The parasites aren't just changing individuals, they're creating a networked hunting system. Every infected predator becomes part of a coordinated force. If this spreads... Movement! Dr. Chen called out suddenly. The bear's massive frame twitched despite heavy sedation. Its brain activity spiked in patterns that defied natural explanation. We're losing containment, Sarah warned. Sedation's failing faster than predicted. The parasites are actively fighting the drugs. John made the call. We start now. Elena, begin the blocking sequence. Sarah, prepare emergency sedation. Everyone else, containment positions. Military personnel took up defensive positions, while John began administering the treatment. The bear's response was immediate and violent. Its entire nervous system seemed to rebel as the blocking agent encountered the parasite's chemical triggers. Massive spike in parasite activity, Elena reported, watching through microscopes. They're accelerating transformation to fight the treatment, some kind of last-ditch survival response. The bear's body convulsed. Monitoring equipment screamed warnings. As vital signs went haywire, they were watching a battle for genetic control play out in real time. Their treatment against millions of microscopic engineers fighting to complete their programmed mission. Neural pattern changing, Sarah called out. The blocking agents reaching the brain, but the parasites are adapting. They're trying to reroute neural pathways. John kept working, adjusting dosages with precision born from decades of experience. Every second brought them closer to either saving their patient or watching it transform into something that would need to be destroyed. Look at this, Elena breathed, studying new data. The parasites, they're communicating, sending some kind of chemical signal to each other, like they're coordinating a final effort. The bear's massive heart began to falter under the strain. They were running out of time, and nature's balance hung on their success or failure in the next few critical moments. The first sign came exactly 6 minutes into treatment. Through her microscope, Elena spotted something extraordinary. The parasite's coordinated behavior was beginning to break down. The blocking agent's working, she announced, voice tight, with controlled excitement. It's disrupting their chemical communication network. They're losing their ability to synchronize. John kept working, adjusting medication flow rates with expert precision while monitoring the bear's vital signs. The massive creature's convulsions began to slow, its neural patterns showing the first signs of returning to natural rhythms. Brain activity stabilizing, Sarah reported. The artificial neural pathways are starting to degrade. Whatever they were trying to build in there, it's falling apart. Dr. Chen's analysis confirmed their cautious optimism. The parasites are dying, but this time it's different. No metamorphosis, no secondary phase. The blocking agents preventing their fail-safe response. Through sophisticated imaging equipment, they watched the battle play out at a microscopic level. The engineered parasites, robbed of their ability to communicate and coordinate, began to succumb to the bear's natural immune system. Temperature dropping, John noted. Heart rate normalizing. These are proper healing responses, not artificial ones. But the victory wasn't without cost. The bear's massive body had been through tremendous strain. Every organ system showed signs of stress. from both the infection and their aggressive treatment. We've stopped the transformation, Elena confirmed, studying neural scans. But the recovery process, this is uncharted territory. No one's ever reversed engineered parasitic modification before. The implications spread beyond their immediate patient. Their success here provided hope for treating other infected wildlife, but also raised crucial questions about long-term effects and potential reinfection. Incoming data from other sites, Colonel Phillips announced. The infected predators. Coordinated movements are breaking down. Whatever signal these parasites were sending between hosts, it's failing. Tom Blackhawk, who'd stayed through the entire crisis, spoke with quiet wisdom. Nature finds its balance, if we give it the chance. The question is, have we stopped this? In time, the bear's breathing had settled into a steady rhythm. For the first time in hours, its muscle tension showed signs of natural sleep rather than parasitic control. They'd won this battle, but the larger war for ecological survival was far from over. The next 48 hours proved crucial in understanding both their success and its implications. The bear's recovery showed promising signs: natural brain activity patterns, normal immune response, and most importantly, no trace of the parasite's engineered communication system. The neural restoration is remarkable, Elena explained, reviewing brain scans. It's not just that the parasites are gone, the bear's natural neural pathways are reasserting themselves, like the brain is healing itself. John monitored their patient's behavior with experienced eyes. Small signs, muscle responses, reflex patterns, pupil dilation, all indicated a return to natural bear behavior rather than engineered aggression. We're seeing similar recoveries in treated wildlife across the region, Dr. Chen reported. Once the parasites lose their ability to communicate between hosts, the animal's natural instincts seem to take over again. But their victory brought new challenges. The CDC established a regional task force to implement preventive measures. Every water source, every wildlife migration route needed monitoring. The threat of reinfection or new engineered parasites loomed large. The military's tracking potential sources, Colonel Phillips revealed. Several unauthorized research facilities have been identified. Someone invested years in developing this bioweapon. Sarah organized local veterinarians into an early warning network. We know what to look for now. Any sign of coordinated predator behavior changes, unusual parasite loads, we can catch it early. Tom Blackhawk worked with tribal authorities to establish traditional wildlife monitoring along ancient migration routes. Our people have watched these patterns for generations. We'll know if they change again. As their sedated patient began, showing signs of waking naturally, John prepared for the final test. Would this bear, the first one they'd saved, remember its natural instincts? Or had the parasites left lasting changes they couldn't detect? The implications reached far beyond one animal's recovery. They'd discovered not just a threat, but humanity's vulnerability to ecological warfare. Nature's delicate balance could be weaponized by those who understood how to engineer its smallest components. Elena's team began documenting everything, creating protocols for identifying and treating future outbreaks. Their experience would become the foundation for a new field of ecological defense. Dawn painted the Montana sky in shades of gold as John Miller prepared for a moment he'd dreamed of through the darkest hours of their crisis. Their recovered grizzly, now fully awake and showing completely natural behavior, was ready for release. Back into the wild. Final neural scans are clear, Elena confirmed, reviewing data from their monitoring equipment. No trace of engineered parasites, no artificial behavior patterns. This is a wild bear again, exactly as nature intended. The release site had been carefully chosen, pristine wilderness far from human settlement, but close enough for continued observation. Trail cameras and discrete monitoring stations would track the bear's reintegration into its natural habitat. Other recovered predators are already showing normal territorial behavior, Dr. Chen reported. They're resuming natural hunting patterns, maintaining proper distances from human areas. The ecosystem is rebalancing itself. The community gathered to witness the release. Ranchers, tribal members, scientists, and local residents who'd all played crucial roles in the crisis. They stood at a safe distance as John prepared to open the transport cage. What we learned here changes everything, Sarah reflected, helping with final preparations. Not just about treating infected wildlife, but about protecting nature itself from being weaponized. Tom Blackhawk nodded sagely. The elders say every crisis brings wisdom if we're willing to learn. We've learned that the smallest things in nature can be turned against us, but also that together we can defend the balance. The military investigation continued, tracking down the sources of the engineered parasites. But here, in this moment, nature's triumph over artificial manipulation took center stage. John opened the cage. The grizzly emerged cautiously, its movements showing the natural wariness of a wild predator. No trace remained of the engineered aggression that had nearly transformed it into a biological weapon. They watched as the magnificent creature lumbered toward the tree line, stopping once to look back at the gathered humans. In that moment, John saw something that moved him deeply, pure, wild intelligence, untainted by human manipulation. The bear disappeared into the forest, but its story had permanently changed the valley. New wildlife monitoring protocols, emergency response networks, and ecological defense systems would help protect against future threats. The community had learned that preserving nature's balance required constant vigilance. "Time to get back to work," John said finally, turning to where other recovered animals awaited treatment. "This was just the beginning. Now we know what's possible. We have to be ready." The morning sun rose fully over the mountains, illuminating a landscape forever changed, not by the crisis that had threatened it, but by the determination of those who had fought to protect nature's delicate balance.